It's like he knew that the hill was just about to start. 6 o'clock on the dot on the East Coast, whether you're in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, or Washington, D.C. We've been listening to the President of the United States with a major announcement there on shipbuilding, standing next to the Secretary of State and the Secretary of War. Hello, good evening, and thanks for being with us. I'm Blake Burman. We are going to get into a whole lot of what the President just said, including this: pursuit on the high seas. The U.S. military stopping another oil tanker and tracking down a third. Here was the Commander-in-Chief moments ago.
Oil. What are we going to do with the oil that we have?
Going to do with what?
The oil that has been seized.
We're going to keep it. We're keeping it.
Where's it? Are we going to sell it or put it in the strategic oil reserve?
Maybe we'll sell it. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we'll use it in the strategic reserves. We're keeping it. We're keeping the ships also.
So what is the end goal here? We are live with the State Department in moments on what comes next. Plus, New Year's goals. The Trump administration teases a major housing plan and touts $2,000 checks coming your way next year. What the White House is saying tonight about its 2026 plans. Also this evening, a shot in the dark. Why is Jim Beam, the major American whiskey maker, pausing some production? Kevin O'Leary with us in moments. And at this hour, happening right now, do you have the golden ticket? Americans all across the country taking their chance at retirement glory. One of the largest Powerball drawings ever is about to take place. But first tonight, here on the Hill, the Golden Fleet. The president, moments ago, announcing his plans to build his own Navy battleship, named after him, as tensions build in the Caribbean. The commander-in-chief saying the U.S. isn't just targeting Venezuela. All countries suspected of trafficking drugs are on notice. The retired Air Force Lieutenant General Richard Newton joins us live in a moment. But first, with us tonight here on the Hill, Tommy Pigott. He is the Deputy Principal Press Secretary over at the State Department with us live. And as I make my way over, Tommy, hello, good on you to be with us tonight. I'm moving and shaking with the president, just wrapping up 6 o'clock on the dot. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
So let's start with the news, the shipbuilding. The fleet was needed to be about 355. Congress mandated that back in 2018, and we're at about 270 or so well below that. Why is this needed?
Well, it's needed, as the president outlined, for peace through strength. And it sounds like a tagline, but it actually is what's necessary to make sure we can have our interests being defended and pursued. We're going to see a revitalization of our shipbuilding industry. That's been a major part of the president's initiatives. And this is an important part of when you have strength, you have peace. And no one can deny the president's a peacemaker.
Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, a gentleman who's on this show frequently. Here's what he said in the Wall Street Journal. He said, quote, "We don't need ships that are not optimized to provide lethality against the Chinese threat." He goes on to say they are focused on the president's visual that a battleship is a cool-looking ship. In the age of drone warfare, why do we need these?
Well, we're talking about a president who has invested across our military capabilities. And for more details, of course, I don't want to speak for the Department of War from the State Department's perspective. But I can say no one can deny that the president has invested a ton of money, ton of time into rebuilding our capabilities across capabilities. That is the important part of strength, as we've seen the president pursue peace.
Of course, all of this, Tommy, comes as we keep our eyes on Venezuela, the waters off the coast of Venezuela, and what the president may or may not do. The AP is reporting right now that Russia has started evacuating families of diplomats from inside Venezuela. Why is that happening, and is that potentially a tell of what maybe could come next?
Well, I don't want to speak for another country's actions, right? But what I can say here is the president has been very clear about his concerns with the illegitimate regime in Venezuela. He's been very clear about his concerns with the drug smuggling that we've seen. He's been very clear with the gangs that we've seen come out of Venezuela. The secretary outlining in his press conference just last week how we have many countries that are cooperating with us countering these narco-terrorists. What's different about the regime in Venezuela is you have a regime that's working with the narco-terrorists. And the president has been clear we are going to stop the flow of deadly drugs coming into our country. I
just heard you talk about drugs and gangs. That was initially what the president had talked about, right? And especially with the shooting of these narco-terrorist boats. Then Susie Wiles in Vanity Fair comes out and says, we think, and I'm paraphrasing here, Maduro's going to cry uncle, right? And there's a real question about Nicolas Maduro's future. And then there's a conversation about the oil on the tankers and the president talking about the oil inside Venezuela. So what is it? What is the goal? Is it Is it drugs? Is it getting Maduro out? Is it the oil? Is there something else that hasn't been discussed at this point?
Well, fundamentally, it's defending our national interests. And the president, even just in that press conference there at the end of that announcement, those questions he was taking, discussed the fact that on these boats, 25,000 Americans could have been poisoned by the drugs in each one of those boats. So he's talking about that consistently. Leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 in the United States are overdoses fueled by the illicit trade of fentanyl. And what you're seeing across the region is designations of cartels. You're seeing cooperation with countries around our region. And what makes Venezuela stand out, again, the illegitimate regime there, is you have a regime that is cooperating with narco-terrorists. In fact, Nicolas Maduro is a narco-terrorist.
Is it something, though, beyond drugs, Maduro, and oil? Like, is that right now what the administration is focused on?
Well, again, the president's made his concerns here very clear, very clear.
Let me move you over to another part of the world, Ukraine and Russia. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, in an interview today, he was quoted as saying this, or the interview was released today. He said, "We're going to keep on trying to negotiate. And I think that we've made progress, but sitting here today, I wouldn't say with confidence that we are going to get a peaceful resolution." Again, he's talking about Ukraine and Russia there. Is that the view within the Trump administration tonight?
Well, the view is we're trying to get to a peace. That is ultimately up to both parties in this. You can't have a negotiated settlement without both sides agreeing to that negotiated settlement. And for many months now, we have seen this administration in a serious exchange trying to get inputs from both sides to see what they would accept. Right now, there's a gap between what one would offer, what one would accept. We're working to try to get that gap filled, make sure that we can have an agreement. But again, it's up to the parties to reach that.
In that Vanity Fair article that I referenced, Susie Wiles was quoted as saying, Trump doesn't believe that Putin wants peace. Is that the assessment, that at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin doesn't want peace? Well,
the assessment is that we're trying to get to a peace, and ultimately it'll be up to what people do, what they agree to. We're having that serious exchange of ideas again. The primary goal here from the president is to end the bloodshed, end the conflict, so people can go home and live prosperous lives with their families. That's the motivation here. That's why the president has seen so much investment in time and different envoys that have gone, the Secretary of State speaking with both sides as well, to try to bring this conflict to an end.
Tommy Pigott with the State Department, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you hanging around, following the president there.
Of course.
Thanks, Tommy. Appreciate it. All right. Want to turn now to NewsNation senior national security contributor, Lieutenant General Richard Newton, with us once again here on the Hill. General, I see the fire going. Merry Christmas to you and the Newton family. Let's start on that announcement from the president and shipbuilding. What do you make of it?
Well, good evening, Blake. Merry Christmas to you and everyone there at NewsNation. I think first and foremost, this is a very broad announcement. Obviously, this advent of 2 battleships. We haven't built a battleship since the Iowa class. Battleships, as the president mentioned, the Missouri, the Wisconsin, the Iowa, and so forth since 1940, and bringing along now these into modern warfare. I question the utility. However, I give praise in terms of trying to rejuvenate American shipbuilding. We're well behind the Chinese. By the way, they have the largest Navy in the world, and so forth. The other aspect of this is it's one thing to build these 2 new battleships. Perhaps there'll be more, but really what I think I applaud at this point is bringing in the support ships that go along with it. I think that's very important, perhaps even more so than the battleship, frankly. We can get into the utility of that, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
General, what did you make of President Trump's comments on Nicolas Maduro? I think that was the strongest the furthest I have heard him go with Maduro. What did you make of it?
I think what the president's aim here is to have Maduro pressure him to step aside. If not, we'll conduct some kinetic strikes to compel him to leave office. I think that's really the aim here.
Strikes on him, or strikes that get him to say, wait a minute here, I need to get on a jet?
Yeah, that would be strikes to get him out of office, perhaps going after drug trafficking facilities, going after port marina facilities, maybe some of their military command and control and so forth. I think the president's aim, however, he doesn't want to go kinetic. I think he wants to compel Maduro with a significant show of force of the USS Gerald Ford and other capabilities. We've got 15 to 20,000 sailors and Marines. We've got a dozen F-35 strike fighters and so forth, and other capabilities that's been growing in the Caribbean. We've got 15% of United States Navy strike capability, surface capability in the Caribbean. That's nearly unprecedented. He's really trying to compel Maduro and his cronies to step aside, go into exile, Russia, Cuba, you name it, but it's to get him out of office. I think that's the bottom line.
Do you think Maduro has hours, days, weeks, or months left inside Venezuela?
It's a great question, Blake. You and I talked about this a couple weeks or so ago. I think it's probably in terms of weeks. I don't think it's in terms of hours and days at this point, because the president, with this blockade, also with increased U.S. military capability now being added into the Caribbean, even on top of the USS Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group and so forth. I think this idea of him seizing ships, by the way, I believe that's from a legal aspect in terms of these sanctioned ships with sanctioned oil headed to our adversaries. That has really hit or will hit Maduro very quickly in financially, both from the Venezuela's economy standpoint, but what he's really concerned about is his own pocketbook. His cronies that are skimming the money off these hundreds of millions of sanctioned oil dollars that are headed out of Venezuela. You take that away from him, that is real leverage.
I appreciate you throwing the tie on, General, but get cozy around the fire there. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Blake. Best to you.
Of course. Talk soon. You as well. All right, still to come tonight. Here on the Hill, just getting started. The president's tariffs. Are they coming for your happy hour? Jim Beam, why they are now hitting the pause on production. The latest economic headache for the president. Mr. Wonderful. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Kevin O'Leary with us on the other side. That, plus are you getting $2,000 checks next year? And jockeying for position. Erica Kirk endorses J.D. Vance for 2028. But there are some who are wondering what could come next. Why one Republican senator is saying not so fast. And are you ready to be a billionaire? It is the 5th largest lottery in history that is set for tonight. How about that for maybe a Christmas miracle? I'm Blake Burman. We got a whole lot of news. Kevin O'Leary back with us, other side, 4 minutes away. I'll see you then.
We've got, like everybody in the whole cabinet, working on trying to get housing to be more affordable. We're going to have a plan, a big plan, to announce sometime soon in the new year that's going to be really good news for the American people who feel like it's just not affordable to buy a home anymore.
That is the president's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, promising a fix soon as the Trump administration potentially tries to tackle the housing crisis. The American dream of buying a home now out of reach for many, with housing costs rapidly outpacing wage growth, as you see there. This, as a new poll shows, just 31% of Americans approve of the Trump administration's handling of the economy as we end 2025. So what is possibly the fix or some of the ideas going into 2026? Joining us now, Kevin O'Leary, chairman of O'Leary Ventures. By the way, I should note, also making his acting debut in the comedy Marty Supreme alongside Gwyneth Paltrow and Timothée Chalamet in theaters on Christmas Day. As if you needed any more screen time, Mr. Wonderful.
I just thought it'd be interesting to step out of my comfort zone and try something new, and I will let the audience decide whether I can perform or not. I really enjoyed the experience. I worked on it for 8 months. It's one heck of a movie. You got to see it in a theater. Getting tremendous press, as you may be aware. Yeah. I think this is Chalamet's Oscar right here.
Okay, all right. I'll give it a look. My word for you. Let's talk about the economy here for a second. Housing. You know this. The new Fed chair not coming in till May. A lot of the housing policies done at the local level. The administration now all of a sudden talking up this housing plan. Can they do anything? What should they do?
Housing's really tough. It's really tough because you've got so many elements. Let's start from the top. Mortgage rates, 2 rate cuts, 25 basis points each, hasn't made a dent in the mortgage markets because these are longer term, 5, 7, 10-year, whatever. And so rates haven't really moved because people are concerned about that 3% inflation rate. That's number one. Number two, there's not a lot of freedom yet. Like, housing's very local. So let's just take California, massive market. The regulatory environment's still very punitive. All those burned down houses, very tough to rebuild on them right now. So you got to change regulation. And then you got a really nasty little problem right now. Softwood lumber input costs. No deal with Canada yet. Countries are still having their issues. And so 25% on the input price of softwood. You can't fix that overnight. So you got to cut a Canadian deal, get it down to a reciprocal rate, maybe 8% or something on softwood. I don't know what you do with California. I mean, they just don't care. I mean, it's one of the worst managed states. I hate to say that, but it's going to take decades to rebuild that place because the regulatory burden is brutal. And mortgage rates, yeah, I don't know. I think while inflation's sitting up there at 3%, tough. I mean, a lender doesn't want to cut rates because they know they're facing 3% inflation. So they don't make anything till they get over 3%. So you get mortgage rates 7-8%.
Let me take you over to Kentucky. You just mentioned Canada and costs and tariffs. Here was the big story. Lexington Herald leader, major Kentucky bourbon maker Jim Beam, shutting distillery for 2026. I know you love your wines, Kevin, but let's talk whiskey here for a second. You know, part of the story here is tariffs and Canada not buying whiskey from within the United States. Is this a rebuke of the Trump tariff policy, or how do you view tariffs this year and going into 26?
No, this problem is a specific problem. Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario, never went to meet with Trump pre-inauguration. They have no relationship, just an adversarial one on tariffs and car parts. And people have to understand Toronto, Canada itself is the 4th largest city in North America. It's massive. The LCBO, which is the regulated buyer of bourbons and whiskeys and American liquors, they've been shut down by Ford. You can't even buy an American wine in the LCBO right now. So they're loading up on French and other suppliers, Japanese whiskeys, you name it. They're in a poo-poo war, back and forth, going at each other, 25% tariffs, and I don't know.
Should Trump end them? I mean, like, what are you telling your companies going into 2026? How do you view tariffs in 25?
I really think the ultimate outcome, you know, Carney is he's the new prime minister, is trying to solve this. Canada needs to get in a much more cooperative mode, and the U.S. has to get in a much more cooperative mode with Canada, because Canada has all the natural resources the U.S. needs: water, paper, rare earth, commodities of all kinds, all priced in U.S. dollars, gold, silver, you name it, they got it. Right. And the largest market's the United States. Why is there a poo-poo war? It's stupid. It makes no sense. There shouldn't be any tariffs between those two countries. Then you can bulk up against the real enemy, the Chinese. I mean, if anybody doesn't think the Chinese want to take over the global economy and come over the top, I'm not being paranoid. I don't mind the Chinese people. The Chinese government, they got plans. And the only way to solve it is to bulk up the North American economy by combining the economies, not the countries, Canada, the United States, and telling the Chinese, don't mess with us. We're too big. We're too big. You can't mess with us. You're never going to catch up with us. Too big. They understand big. That's what they understand.
Speaking of big, let me leave you with this. There's a lot of folks who want to know if a $2,000 quote-unquote tariff dividend or check is coming their way next year as the administration continues to talk about it. Is this a good idea, especially given the lesson of COVID, when we know there were obviously lots of reasons why inflation went crazy, but as we sent money to people, that was part of the reason. Good idea to send $2,000 checks?
No, bad idea. Helicopter money causes more inflation. And that's the affordability issues driven by the fact that proteins and things that people buy every day are facing highly inflated prices on top of tariffs on things like bananas and pineapples, which we don't even grow. So we shouldn't tariff anything we don't have. That doesn't make sense. So you have to adjust this stuff, but no free money flying from the sky. We did so much of that during the pandemic and drove inflation up to 9%. We don't want to go back up there. Stop with the free money. We don't need it. We need to cool things down on inflation, get it down towards 2%, which is the Fed mandate. Then all of a sudden you don't have this affordability thing. And by the way, the Democrats are smart. They're using it as a real weapon. Two big issues for the midterm. You're starting to see that now. You'll see a lot more of it in January. That's when we start the midterm election, really. It's going to be affordability and health care. And those two together are kind of linked. You can't have your insurance, healthcare insurance, double and call that affordability. And you don't want inflation staying at 3.1%.
Yep, we're talking about it every night here on The Hill. Kevin, best of luck to you, sir, with the movie. Kevin O'Leary with us tonight.
Thank you.
Here on The Hill. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Still much more ahead. Here on the other side, 2028 preview, perhaps. Young Republicans making their pick for who could take the mantle from the president, where the vice president lands in a big poll next. Plus, the new battleship. What does it look like, and what does the president want to do with them when we return? All All right, well, President Trump will have to pass the torch in 2028, and young Republicans are making their voices heard on who they want to succeed him. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, won the Turning Point USA straw poll in a landslide, getting 84% of the vote, with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and Ron DeSantis, as you might imagine, in a very distant second and third from there. That straw poll taken after conservative activist and Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, gave her endorsement of the vice president over the weekend.
We're going to ensure that President Trump has Congress for all 4 years. We are going to get my husband's friend, J.D. Vance, elected for 48 in the most resounding way possible.
Our Joe Khalil live with us tonight on that appearance from over the weekend and that straw poll that came out, Joe, that was pretty strong for the vice president.
Yeah, Blake, look, we're 3 years out, obviously. There is a ton of time, but this was a really significant weekend and moment for Vice President J.D. Vance. Obviously, you saw the straw poll there, running away with that. But the endorsement from Erica Kirk, perhaps even more important, because Turning Point USA, look, it doesn't represent all Republicans, but it is a large portion of the younger energy, the conservative base, people who are college age that are either MAGA or who consider themselves MAGA adjacent. And her endorsement really is the beginning of perhaps a consolidation among that crowd for J.D. Vance. When you look at the polling itself, most of it does look like what we saw in the straw poll, actually. It's usually Vance. Somewhere in there is Marco Rubio and Governor Ron DeSantis. This particular poll has Don Jr. with 11%. But you can see the gap, right? J.D. Vance very clearly leading this field. He gave an address at Turning Point yesterday afternoon, and it sounded a lot like a 2028 campaign speech. He was preaching unity for the MAGA movement, which is obviously a bit fractured right now, but he also really went on the attack, did not hold back against who may be his political opponents in 28 on the other side here. Take a listen.
It looks like they're going to nominate a California liberal who's presided over rolling blackouts, open borders, and unchecked violent gangs. They're just trying to settle on whether it's going to be Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris.
So, Blake, there is a whole faction of the sort of classical conservative, the Reagan-type Republican, that maybe J.D. Vance doesn't sit well for them. But for the other side of the party, he appears to be in a very strong position, at least 3 years out now.
Certainly is. Joe Khalil, live for us tonight. Joe, thank you. Coming into our newsroom at this hour, the Department of Homeland Security now tripling its incentives for illegal immigrants to leave the country voluntarily. DHS saying anyone who signs up to self-deport through the CBP Home app by the end of the year will receive a $3,000 stipend and a free flight home. The DHS Secretary Kristi Noem saying in a statement, quote, illegal aliens should take advantage of this gift and self-deport because if they don't, we will find them, we will arrest them, and they will never return. Well, how about a $1.6 billion present for Christmas? That's the size of tonight's Powerball jackpot, making it the 5th largest in the history of this country when it comes to lotteries. We're due for a winner, right? When the money gets that high. The last time someone hit the Powerball jackpot, you got to go all the way back to September. Our Nancy Liu joins us now with a look at all the buzz over tonight's big drawing. Hello, Nancy.
Hey there, Blake. With a top 5 jackpot tonight, it's estimated that well over 100 tickets are being sold across the country every second right now. And a lot of them are churning out here at this liquor store in Hawthorne, California. This is the front of the line that actually stretches out the door. People are buying tickets, a lot of cash exchanging hands. Never mind that the odds are 1 in 292 million. And also that lump sum payment, you know, we have this graphic here, that $1.6 billion jackpot, it would come down to $735 million. That's a lot of serious cash, of course, but that is before taxes. And so that would come down to about 400 or so million, still life-changing money. So people don't care. They want it. Take a listen. How merry of a Christmas would it be?
Oh my God, don't have me fall on this ground now and start kicking my feet up. It would be a merry, 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 very merry Christmas. We're gonna win this. We got the good last name going. Our last name is Pleasant. We're gonna pleasantly win and take this thing.
It would snow. It'd be like it'd be snowing here, you know. I would really, it would be really, really beneficial. So,
But the odds are against you.
It's odds against it. I mean, you got odds against everything that you do. You take a chance and then, win, lose, or draw. You can't win it if you ain't in it.
So, of course, Blake, we're in it. This is the LA Bureau, which may not be in after tomorrow because the drawing is tonight. We'll see.
How many tickets did you buy?
We have 2, but my husband, of course, bought many, many more. But the odds are against us, so I'll be back with you tomorrow, probably.
Blame it on the husband if you don't win. Smart strategy. Nancy Liu live for us tonight out west. Nancy, thank you. All right, so as we started the show, it was the president making a big announcement about unveiling a new golden fleet of Navy battleships, right? And then he took questions from reporters there in Mar-a-Lago. It was a question, or really the answer to a question, in which the president made his strongest statement yet about Nicolas Maduro. And it was our Kelly Meyer inside the room who asked that question. Our team turning around the soundbite right now. We'll play it for you on the other side. Full panel back with me. I got to go down the hallway, hook a left. I'll see you there, other side of the break.
News Nation is taking you back in time this Christmas Eve. Back to the first Black Friday. Decking the halls of the decade of decadence. A very 80s Christmas. Christmas Eve at 8, 7 Central on News Nation.
All right, so President Trump, alongside the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Secretary of War Pete Hegseth in Mar-a-Lago moments ago ahead of the Christmas holiday, where he announced his plans for a quote-unquote golden fleet of new Navy battleships. Of course, all this comes as the U.S. Coast Guard steps up its efforts to try to take down yet another oil tanker near Venezuela. Our Kelly Meyer live in Mar-a-Lago. Kelly, you were just inside the room with the president, and he gave an answer on Venezuela, and I thought to myself, wow, I've never heard him go that far about Nicolas Maduro. And then I just found out it was you who was asking the question. Tell me about it.
Yeah, Blake, we heard about this announcement, and really what immediately came to mind as the president was saying this was alongside his Secretary of War and Secretary of State, your mind goes to all of this that's going on with Venezuela, the escalation we've been seeing, especially with the seizure of the oil tankers. But then it was this announcement about shipbuilding and the Trump fleet and the new Trump vessel, the ship that he is getting constructed or putting under construction. But what we focused on there and asked him about was he keeps mentioning Venezuela and going to strike on land soon. He's mentioned that more than 15 times, I said to him, including in those remarks he gave there in Mar-a-Lago tonight. So we asked him, what really is the end game here? Take a listen.
Why should Maduro take your threat seriously? And
he can do whatever he wants.
What's your end
Maduro?
game? What's your end game?
There's no answer. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, we have a massive armada formed, the biggest we've ever had, and by far the biggest we've ever had in South America. He can do whatever he wants. It's all right. Whatever he wants to do. If he wants to do something, if he plays tough, it'll be the last time he's ever able to play tough.
And you wish you could have got another question in there to ask what exactly that means. So what is the end game here? Is it to remove him from power? Another question I had for him, Blake, was, does this push us closer to another prolonged conflict potentially, which is something that his supporters, specifically his MAGA supporters, do not want to see. They don't want to see another forever war, another prolonged conflict. And that's something I wanted to ask him about as well. As far as those oil tankers, the latest one, still in an active pursuit. He said there that we are still chasing it, but he said we will get it. Blake.
All right, our Kelly Meyer in the room with the president tonight. Kelly, thank you. Full panel here with me now. Jasmine Wright, White House correspondent for the digital news outlet Notice. Megan Mobbs is the director for American Safety and Security at Independent Women. And Megan Hayes, former director of message planning in the Biden White House. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. Here's what I noticed in that video, that Kelly's question. when Kelly pressed, "What's your end game?" Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth immediately looked at the president. Like they gave him like some side eye trying to figure out.
They want to know too.
What's the end game and really what the answer was there, Jasmine.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was notable. They're waiting to see what he's going to say because that's a question that we've all been asking ourselves. What is President Trump doing? What are his actual intentions going when we're talking about Venezuela, particularly because the answer has continued to change. Initially, it was about narcotics. It was about fentanyl, even though fentanyl doesn't necessarily come from Venezuela. It's about those drug cartels or alleged drug cartel boats. Then it's about oil tankers and oil. And so kind of the answer has been changing, and so people are fundamentally wondering where this goes next. If you believe Susie Wiles in that Vanity Fair article, she basically kind of winked and nodded and said it was about regime change.
Maduro, yeah.
And about Maduro. And so I think that the fundamental question that people continuously are asking the president and asking folks who talk to the president is what is the end game? And you heard him say there is no, there is no answer. And I just don't think that is particularly true.
To Jasmine's point, I had the spokesperson for the State Department on, Megan, at the top of the show reacting to all this, and those were my questions. It started with drugs. It went to the Susie Wiles, Maduro crying uncle, and now the president keeps talking about oil. What is the end game here?
I don't think the president knows, and I'm not sure that they started this with an end game. And I think that Congress, if the most important people here, would like to know what the end game is. And they still, to my knowledge, have not briefed Congress in a real way of what the end game is. And that's great that the president is trying to play Battleship here and trying to figure out what the end game is while we're doing it. But you're putting American lives in danger being there. And this is a huge amount of personnel and resources that are now down there for what? For what reason? And I just think this is going to have a negative impact. Congress is going to start asking questions come the new year.
Do you have a sense of what the end game is?
So I think the president is exceptional at wielding what I would call strategic ambiguity. If he was out there stating explicitly what he was going to do, then Maduro would know. And so I think the upside is he's actually leaving some room for maneuver. And that's ultimately what we want when we're talking about an operation like this. And so I think he probably has an idea where he's going with this. This is kind of a war of words right now more than anything. I think that strategic ambiguity is necessary to really do what he's trying to do, which is have Maduro, I think, step down, have Maduro feel so fearful that he actually elects to remove himself from power rather than any type of kinetic action.
Mick Mulvaney uses that phrasing all the time around Trump, strategic ambiguity. The question is, though, I think, is what are the next steps? Like, what do you think we expect to see next?
Well, that's a big question. I think you're going to continue to see them move in the direction of seizing oil. Obviously, there's some legal questions about whether or not they can actually keep the oil that was seized on that first tanker because they didn't have the specific warrant that requires. We'll see what happens with this Bella 1 that they're currently in pursuit of now. The president has said for months that there would be land strikes, but there is wide acknowledgement, both in the administration and I think on Congress, is that to do that, they would need approval from Congress, which the president says he can go to, but he doesn't need to go to. And so I think that's going to be probably the next fight next year.
All right. Also tonight, speculation continues to grow around Vice President J.D. Vance's political future as the Republican Party's potential next nominee. It is a long time away, but it is also here before us. Here's how President Trump has progressed on the topic.
Do you view Vice President J.D. Vance as your successor, the Republican nominee in 2028?
No, but he's very capable.
Do you think the MAGA movement can survive without you as its leader?
Yes, I do. You look at Marco, you look at J.D. Vance, who's fantastic. You look at, I could name 10, 15, 20 people right now just sitting here.
Do you agree that the heir apparent to MAGA is J.D. Vance?
Well, I think most likely, in all fairness, he's the vice president. We have great people. I don't have to get into them, but we have one of them standing right here. We have J.D., obviously. The vice president is great.
And Megan, the reason why we're talking about this is, of course, because the Turning Point USA event over the weekend in which he was endorsed by Erica Kirk. That's a long time between now and 2028, though.
It is. It's a very long time. And I would just say that Americans don't like coronations, right? Inherently, the best thing about a contested primary is it forces us to confront our bad ideas, our good ideas, find consensus, and allow people to rally behind the selected candidate. And that's a very positive thing. You just said it. It's a long way away. And I would just say time will tell. The
straw poll there, Megan, J.D. Vance, 84%, Marco Rubio, and basically at 5%. We saw this in the last election with a coronation of a vice president. What should J.D. Vance be thinking right now? And from your sort of vantage point and how he needs to position himself going forward?
He needs to be doing the job of a vice president and give no leaning that he is going to set up an operation to run for president. I think also he runs the risk of if they do not do well in the midterms, people might want to turn the page on Trump, and he is part of that. And then that puts Marco Rubio up much more easily than he is. And also Susie Wiles very much gave a blessing to Marco Rubio over the vice president. So that's interesting too. But Republicans need to learn from Democrats here of what we did. Do not have a coronation, have a primary.
What's the number that Trump needs to be at, percentage-wise, approval rating, for J.D. Vance to be, if he goes down that path, a front runner or close to it? Or let me put it this way, as the viable candidate.
So I don't actually think it's a Trump approval rating. I think it's what happens in Congress. If you lose control of the House and you lose some Senate seats and you lose some governor seats, I think that people might want to be turning the page on Trump. And Trump also turns out a very different electorate than J.D. Vance will. They are not the same people that are going to support them. Is he going to have the same coalition that voted for Trump in 24? I do not think so. So I don't necessarily think it's about Trump's approval rating. I think it's about how Americans feel about Republicans in Congress.
Is it that, Congress or Trump?
I think it's a bit of both here. I think really what you're looking for is to rally a coalition around whoever the candidate is going to be. And so I think this is going to be a lot of different pieces, but I really do think the most important thing was what you said earlier, Blake. It's a long way away. Yep. Americans just aren't thinking about that right now.
Here was Erica Kirk from over the weekend.
We're going to ensure that President Trump has Congress for all 4 years. We are going to get my husband's friend, J.D. Vance, elected for 48 in the most resounding way possible.
All right, so here's the betting markets, right? This is Kalshi right now, and you could basically see J.D. Vance kind of matches that straw poll. It's Vance and everyone else. He's been running right around 50% or so for quite some time. And then if you flip forward to what could a national election look like and sort of what the betting markets and the prediction markets are saying, again, he's been running ahead of anyone else. Do we have that? Show it if we do. Either way, he's been running ahead of everyone else, ahead of Gavin Newsom. Here we go. Vance at 30, Newsom at 20, and then it's basically Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and Marco Rubio behind that. So yes, it is a long way, Jasmine, but that's sort of where the money and the polls are tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that J.D. Vance has name ID. He is the vice president. I think you saw the similar sentiment with Kamala Harris, even though that we know how that went. And so I think that he does have the name ID. Obviously, TPUSA is going to be a huge backing for him, kind of a shadow arm is how they typically operate once they get into the presidential contest. Again, he hasn't actually said that he's going to run for president, right, but everyone is expecting him to. I think fundamentally, though, CNN had a poll out earlier that said 64% of people don't know who they want the Republican nominee. And Vance was only 22% in that survey. And so I think that he is not going to clear the field. I think there's going to be a robust primary. Okay. And he's going to have to debate his ideas with other folks and try to convince the American public. I think what you saw in his TPUSA speech, though, is that he's treading a very careful line, trying not to contract, do purity tests, as he says, but instead trying to expand the coalition, perhaps beyond what Trump has.
And of course, as you know this, and you know this as well, you can't get ahead of the president, right? And that's part of the battle and what we watch going forward here. Megan, Jasmine, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill. Other side, President Trump. Why is he teeing up a plan to take over several golf courses? I'll explain when we return. All right, if you're just getting home, trying to catch up on today's top stories, here's some of the Hill headlines in the news tonight. New Trump envoy says goal is to make Greenland a part of the U.S. Yes, that is the word from the current governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, who the president just appointed as his special envoy to Greenland. The prime ministers of Denmark and Greenland both strongly condemned Landry's comments, saying a U.S. takeover is not going to happen. Also tonight, there's this. Senator Sanders is set to swear in Mamdani as New York City's mayor. The mayor-elect, Zoran Mamdani, is set to have Senator Bernie Sanders swear him in during a New Year's Day public block party near City Hall. Mamdani chose the independent senator from Vermont who endorsed him for mayor. Those two together at the swearing in. And then there's this. Trump's attempted takeover of D.C. golf courses sets off controversy. The Trump administration sending a notice of default to the National Links Trust, the local nonprofit that has run D.C.'s public golf courses for years. The White House saying the president intends to help renovate and beautify the courses himself if he does take them over. To check out those stories and more, all you have to do is head on over to thehill.com. All right, well, it is T-minus 2 nights, as you know, until Santa begins his trip from the North Pole, circumventing the globe and making millions of stops along the way. But thanks to an initiative from United Airlines and using not sleighs, but their fleet of jets, some kids are now getting a sneak peek at Santa's workshop before the big night. The North Pole has temporarily been added as a new hub. In this case, you're seeing some special children chosen through various charities, including the Make-A-Wish Foundation, on a voyage that includes getting to meet the big man himself. Look at that. Scenes like this happening at a dozen airports all across the country. 9-year-old Leah, for example, survived a shark attack and almost lost her hand.
Really healing for us, just the whole experience.
These kids getting an early gift to remember, and you can say, a Saint Nick of time. Well, tonight on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she will be speaking to the New York Congressman Mike Lawler, Republican from New York, set to discuss the Trump administration's pressure campaign on Venezuela. That's coming up right now here on News Nation. I thank you so much for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I'm Blake Burman. Let us give you a live look right now over at the White House just before we say goodbye, because the focus for the president, even though he is tonight in South Florida, the eyes of the administration are on Venezuela. Big comments from the president. News Nation was inside the room, and Elizabeth takes it from here.